Welcome to the Strategic Families Podcast, where we challenge families to be rooted in God's Word, energized with gospel-centered purpose, and activated on mission for His kingdom. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Strategic Families Podcast. This is Graham Clark, and this is episode 1.06 with Dan Martin. I am so excited for you guys to hear from Dan today. What an awesome man of God that we have so much to learn from, especially those of us who are still in the early years of parenting. Dan is a part of the exclusive Three Daughters Club. So if you are a part of that club, hit us up on the website. Would love to hear your experience. I'm a part of that club too. I'm a card-carrying member, maybe even the president. I don't know. But it is an awesome club to be a part of because, man, there's nothing like a little girl. Am I right? I'm right. If you have little girls, you know you don't need to have three of them. They're awesome. Dan is going to share a lot of his wisdom from raising three daughters and how he loved them so well, he and his wife, Jennifer. In this episode, I think the point that Dan makes most strongly is that we need to win their hearts, and he'll talk about that. What a beautiful picture. You know, like a lot of our guests, Dan hasn't written any books, at least none that I know of. He could if he wanted to, I'm sure, but he is a faithful man of God who has so much to teach us. So I am excited for you to be able to learn from him today and put a lot of what he says into practice. All right, let's roll it. I am thrilled to introduce our guest today, Mr. Dan Martin. Dan, thank you so much for being on.
It's a privilege to be here, Graham. Thank you for the invitation and looking forward to these few minutes together.
Awesome. Dan, I remember one of my most favorite memories from church is that Sunday when you guys were up front and becoming members of the church. And there's something about you where I said, man, I got to go up and meet that guy. And we shook hands and our families introduced each other. And it was just a sweet moment. And I remember telling our pastor at the time, I said, man, that was a good pickup, that Martin family. So I'm so glad that we started that relationship and the friendship and brotherhood in Christ that we've shared. Dan, why don't you give us an introduction of yourself, where you grew up and where you've worked and where you work now and when you got married and the number of children you have and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm an MK, a missionary kid. Was born in Central Texas, but when I was born, my parents were already missionaries in Mexico. So I grew up in Mexico, mid to late 60s, 70s as well. Came back to the States for college and then spent a dozen years in Guatemala as a missionary. That was after college. Studied engineering, but my first kind of work was out of the country in Guatemala. Then came back to the States. I was in church ministry work for about 14 or 15 years and ended as a senior pastor for a number of years in Texas. And then came here to Charlotte, North Carolina to work with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. So I currently work here at the association in the Internet Evangelism Department and love what I do. It's an amazing fit that God has brought together of the engineering background, the ministry background, and the international component of my life. So I love it.
Awesome. Now, tell us a little bit about your family. I know you've got, you are in the same exclusive club that I have joined, the Three Daughters Club. So tell me about those girls and where they are now in life.
Yeah, well, mine is a little more exclusive than yours, I think, because I only have three daughters. So I have been married to my wife now for almost 28 years. Jennifer has been such a blessing. God brought us together. I was already a missionary. She was traveling with her family doing music here in the U.S. We met and corresponded long distance for a couple of years and then got married. Then God gave us three amazing daughters. I often say that when I grow up, I want to be like my girls because they are pretty special. My oldest is married, and we'll be having our first grandbaby in just a few weeks, about 4 weeks from now.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to have a grandson. So first boy child after three girls in the family. So, and grandson, the middle one works for a local church here in Charlotte and is dating a godly young man. And the youngest graduates from college in 4 weeks. So the 1st of May is going to be a busy time for the Martin family.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations on all that. That's fantastic. Now, I didn't prepare this question in advance, but you got to tell me, how does it feel that your youngest is about to graduate from college?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. In some ways, it feels more significant than the first one going to college. So it does feel amazing. It has been fast. COVID has created some unique times. She had to come back for a semester because classes were virtual. The dormitories were closed. So it's been a really fast college experience for her. And my youngest just seems like she's always the kid. She's too young to be graduating from college. And she's literally doing an internship here at the association for the summer. And just to see her in a professional setting, doing professional work is kind of warping my mind a little bit.
Wow, that's awesome. I was just talking with a parent who's around your stage of life, and they said something similar. Is just, they start turning into more of your peers, and that's just crazy and beautiful all at the same time. So, our title here is Strategic Families Podcast, and so one of the things that really struck me about your family, Dan, and your wife Jennifer and your 3 daughters. One of the things you shared with me is how your daughters, I mean, you didn't say it in these terms, but I could tell that your daughters respect so much your opinion, especially when it comes to things like young men who are involved in their lives and things like that. And I love how seriously you took that. And I love the basis of that. And I was wondering if you could just talk to us about your family environment as your girls were growing up. What do you think it was that helped them have such trust in you and Jennifer and your advice to them as adults?
Well, I have to say that I made a lot of mistakes. I do believe that through all of that, they knew that I genuinely loved and continue to love them. And I tried to express to them often that my ultimate desire was for them to find success in whatever path God laid before them. So I think during those years, I focused a lot on wisdom and truth and kind of pouring into their lives. And so I think that kind of came back now in some ways, and they valued that. I think the grace of God was a big component of that. I often say that, God has called us to intentionally invest and pour into our children. Children are not like, just some organic matter that you just kind of put together and see how it turns out. They're living beings that God has called us to disciple. And the book of Proverbs talks about molding them, and the Old Testament often talks about raising them. And so I think that God's called us to intentional leadership and to intentionally desire something for them beyond ourselves. And so I think that has made a difference. And I think in some ways, I don't want to put words into their mouth, but I think that if we were to ask them, that would be something that has affected why they would want to continue to ask my opinion or want my blessing as they continue to grow and choose a mate for life and things like that.
Yeah, amazing advice. I love what you said about how they're, we can't look at it as science experiments where if you put in this and this and this, you'll get X. That's not how it works. These are individuals, like you said, and they have hopes and dreams and desires that may be different from our own. It's our job to help nurture them and love them in the way that God has called us to. And I love that you mentioned the grace of God. I think every parent understands the grace of God is absolutely critical in all parenting endeavors. I was going to ask about the love and the nurture and respect side of this. On the negative side, if kids don't have that kind of nurturing in the home. This is the reason you hear about kids, for instance, joining a gang. I mean, a terrible example, but kids are looking for belonging somewhere. They want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, even if they can't articulate it. And for you guys, obviously you figured out how to help your kids want to be a part of something amazing and wonderful and life-giving. I just wonder if you could talk to us about the Martin family. What did it mean to be a part of the Martin family, and why do you think your girls felt such a clear sense of belonging to your family?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth to that. The idea of having the belonging, and the idea of some place where I fit and bring a unique piece to all of this. And what I've seen, what I believe I've seen sometimes, is that some people try to make family as the bigger piece. So I am belonging to family, and that's the bigger piece. And I believe God uses the family, but I think that the ultimate goal has to go beyond that. If the end is just to be a part of family, then it's kind of a dead end, and it ends up again being a hollow idol, because the end is to glorify God. And that's really what fulfills all mankind. That's really what fulfills you and me. That's that vacuum, that's that hole that we have in us. That's what God created us for. So I believe the family is a vehicle to get us there. And that belonging to the family that helps me do that gives me a sense of belonging. Maybe to use a sports analogy, the camaraderie of a team is not just to have camaraderie of a team. The camaraderie of a team is because they're all pushing towards another goal that's beyond the team, and that's the championship. And I think that's important for families to understand. Okay, where are we going? And I have to credit my dad and my upbringing. My dad taught us that loving and serving God and bringing glory to Him was bigger than anything else. So as a family, as a cohesive unit, we served. My dad was a missionary, and it wasn't just dad was a missionary. We were missionaries. We saw that as the Martin family was a missionary family in Mexico serving God. And then as I went into ministry and my daughters came along, and we served as a cohesive unit. I remember in a tiny town in the panhandle of Texas, I mean, we just all saw ourselves. Theologically, this is going to sound wrong, but we saw ourselves as the pastors of the church. My daughters weren't giving pastoral advice, but when Vacation Bible School came around, they were all integral parts of the skit. When there was a need to clean, when there was a need to go do this or that or the other at the church, we just did it as a family. And when someone had a need in the community that we went to serve them, they didn't always go with us, but they all knew that together as a family, we were kind of making that happen. They may be sacrificing their dad, time with their dad, so their dad could go somewhere, or they may be sacrificing something else, but all of us were sacrificing to bring glory to God and to help someone else in that. So I think that's the thing that kind of brought that sense of unity and camaraderie and togetherness, that we were all pursuing a common goal.
Dan, you get extra credit for that, major extra credit for that response. That's amazing. I can't tell you how much I agree with that. I love that you pointed beyond the family, because as much as we love families and we want to focus on families and help people shore up the family unit, I'm so glad you brought that up. The whole goal of this ministry, or any good family ministry, is not just to create a nicer family or a cuter family or better family photos or better family vacations or anything like that. The chief end of man is to glorify God, and families are just a piece of how He intends to do that. And it's our job to get on board with that and be on mission for Him. I'm so glad you said that. incredible. And I love the point that you made about that's how you grow close together. That's how you can strategically build that community and that culture in your family, is by serving together, because that's part of God's plan too, is that we would be serving, that we would align our hearts to his. And that's what you guys did with Vacation Bible School and those kinds of efforts. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth just kind of pausing for a minute and just asking those who are listening, how do you intentionally incorporate your children into your ministry activities? How do you intentionally incorporate your children into external service for God and bringing glory to God? Just something to think about.
Absolutely. And not only to think about it, but to take action on. I love that challenge. What a great challenge. That's something that Katie and I have been talking about. And, of course, COVID has made that more difficult, but that God's call has not gone away because COVID's here. We have ways of serving, and we might need to get creative, but yes, that is absolutely our calling. And I love how you tied the service into a sense of belonging and culture of your family. And I wanted to ask, I know you guys are relatively recent empty nesters, and our kids are still in the home. And, there are many times where I've thought about that day where I'm going to start to be an empty nester. And, the way I've always thought about it is, hey, at that point, it's pencils down. Your training period is over. Wonder if you could just talk about that. I mean, my impression is that my influence is going to go off a cliff. And if you could chart it, you'd say, well, you don't have nearly as much influence as you used to have. And so that makes me want to just kind of take it more seriously now. And I wonder if you can just talk about what it feels like to be an empty nester now as you look back. And do you think about that time? Do you think about maybe there are some things that I would have done differently? I don't know. Is there any encouragement you can offer to those of us who still have kids in the home, who are looking forward to that day, maybe with a little bit of dread and wanting to make sure that we are as faithful as we can be right now?
Yeah. So I would say that the quantity of time, that one-on-one or that family time where the person is in the home and where you have more authority than influence, maybe, or both authority and influence in their lives, will change. But I don't think that necessarily means that influence has to change. I think the influence comes in more important places and in more significant moments. So I'm really thankful that God is allowing us to continue to have a strong relationship with our daughters now that they're grown. We've made a lot of mistakes. When the girls were growing up, I leaned heavily into teaching wisdom and truth and, the cerebral parts, what you need to know about life and about God and those kinds of things. And then when my oldest daughter got ready to leave and we took her to the airport in Albuquerque, New Mexico to fly to Ohio for college, I remember her just getting on the plane. I cried my eyes out. This was a big moment. And she wanted independence, and we wanted to honor that and respect that. And I think in a lot of ways, we backed off way too much. And I don't know if she would say it quite this way, but I tend to think that maybe it felt to her more like abandonment than giving space. And so over time, we've learned that, and the balancing act of moving from that childhood relationship to the relationship with an adult, child is a challenging, narrow, walking a tightrope kind of thing. It's a tough and messy. A counselor that my wife and I have gone to says that, growth comes in awkward and messy steps. And so it's kind of been that way for us, but God has been so faithful, and the incredible desire that we had to continue to have relationship and to maybe less than have influence, but to have a deep sense of respect for one another has been given to us. And I see it as a gift from God. And so I think that's kind of the key. It's God has moved us from a relationship where an authoritative relationship where I'm the parent, you're the child, to a peer relationship where there's mutual respect. And I have huge respect. I love to ask my daughters about their perspectives on social issues because they see social issues differently from myself. I grew up in a different era and was shaped by different things. They value social activity and justice in a way that is different from my generation. So I'm learning from them. And I hope that in some ways, and I think they would probably say that they continue to learn from me. So I love that even as the empty nesting process has taken place, that we're stepping into a new relationship of mutual respect. And as we mutually respect one another, we grow together.
That's awesome. I love the picture that you've painted of the relationship that you have with your daughters as adults, and the mutual respect is amazing. Now, Dan, I know you well enough to know that you're going to give me all kinds of disclaimers, and you'll be humble as you characteristically are. And so we'll go ahead and add the caveat that God is sovereign and God is gracious and God has done amazing things through your family. And so this next question, I'm not asking for secret sauce, but I also know that it's no accident that your daughters are walking with the Lord and that you have such a great relationship with them. And so I just wonder if you could give us 2 or 3 principles of how you and Jennifer were intentional in the home, recognizing all along that ultimately this is God's work in you. But what did you guys intentionally set out to say? These are the kind of things that we want to instill in our children while they're in our home.
Yeah. I don't know that we were as careful and as thoughtful. I think that there was a lot of intentionality. There was a deep passion in us to do this and do this well, to guide them toward Christ and to the gospel in a good way. I don't know that I thought through it as deeply as a lot of people are thinking through it even now, and maybe even those who are listening to this podcast. But one of the things that I think guided us was consistency, wanting our children not to hear what we believed, but to see what we believed in action. So even though it was wisdom and truth, I wanted them to always see me acting in wisdom and truth. I wanted them to see a consistency in that. And my wife did too. And we weren't fully consistent, but I think that there was maybe a 51% in that. And so that I think made a significant difference. Valuing God above anything else. And this is maybe a little bit of a hobby horse of mine, but I think often we talk about the value of God and his people and gathering with his people in church and many things like that. Maybe this is still stemming from my pastoral background, but we say those things, but we're quicker to set those things aside than we are to set aside a lot of other things. So, we say, well, yeah, absolutely. God and church and God's people and serving God are very important. But right now there's a ball game. Right now there's this church, this school function, there's this other thing that's going on, and we set those things aside. And I would just say we've got to be really, really honest and say, okay, what makes room for what in our lives? Because whatever makes room for something else takes second place. So if church makes room for sports, sports are first. If church makes room for school, school is first. If God makes room for fun or recreation or amusement or any of those things, then God is in second place. And so the consistency in that, knowing that, having big God theology, God is first and God is sovereign and God must be our ultimate priority, and seeking him. If I said it once, I said it 1,000 times to my girls. when you grow up, the one thing I want you to do is to love God more than anything else. What I would do over again, I would listen more. I would listen a lot more. I would hear what they're thinking and feeling a lot more. I was not good at that. I was a really good teacher. I was a really good instructor, but I wasn't a really good listener.
That's amazing advice. That's just pure gold, Dan. I can hear it in your story there that teaching is good, instruction is good, and I fall to that too. And I've kind of fallen to prey to this idea that, well, if I just teach it and shove it in their brains, well, then they'll have it, and then I've done my duty. And what you've helped us learn and reminded us is that we have to model it. They have to see it. And I love that you and Jennifer made a point of that through the years, that it's not only that we need to teach truth, we need to live the truth and demonstrate the truth and model the truth so that our kids can see this is real. These are not just words that we speak, but this is life, and true life is found only in Christ. And I know you guys modeled that so well. So thank you for that. Okay, scriptures. What scriptures come to mind for you that most influence your parenting?
Well, probably first, Proverbs 23:6 just seemed like, when I heard it, recognized it, whatever, at that moment where it just kind of sunk in, it was one of those aha light bulb moments. So all through the book of Proverbs, kind of to set this up, in Proverbs, first chapters especially, you hear often the writer says, my son, hear, my son, receive, my son, don't forget, my son, listen. Over and over, he's talking up to his son and catch this. But when he comes to Proverbs 26, he starts talking about old age and being a source of blessing to his parents. And he talks about the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice. I long for that. I want my daughters to be righteous, and in that to find joy. He who fathers a wise son will be glad in him. Let the father and mother be glad. Let her who bore you rejoice. I think every single person listening to this podcast wants that. They don't want grief and sorrow and pain, and we always get some of that. But it's like, to see my children and to know that the basis of that is in their walking with God and loving God and knowing God more than in, whether or not they're on an NBA team or they're, CEOs of some huge corporation or something like that. But then verse 26 kind of was just that come down and clinch moment. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways. And here's the thought: who owns your child's heart? What captures their heart? Our children love something above everything else. And we want them to love God above everything else. But as they are growing into that, I believe God has given them parents. And it's our job to win the hearts of our children. When couples date, especially the guys, are trying to win the heart of the young lady, because young ladies have got it all. The women are, we're the empty, got nothing. I need something. I need to win. She's got, she's got life and she's got it all together, and we're trying to win their heart because we desperately need them, and without them we are nothing. And so we're winning their heart. But sometimes I think we take it for granted that the children must give us their heart. They can give us their obedience without giving us their heart. They can give us moments and time without giving us their heart. So my challenge became years ago, I want to earn and win the hearts of my children. I want my children to want to know me and please me. This is going to sound terrible, and I hope our listeners will hear it in the spirit that it's given in. But I wanted my daughters to want to please me more than they wanted to please anything or anyone else, more than they wanted to please their friends at school, more than they wanted to please someone else, because I knew that I wanted good for them. And I didn't know that every other influence in their life wanted that. I didn't know that the little friend at school really had their best interest at heart. And if they earned their heart, that's where my daughters would go. I think we know that innately, intuitively. I think we know that whatever owns my child's heart, that's what my child will pursue. And so I asked God to let me win their hearts. And I think in some ways that's still a gift God has given me.
Yes, indeed, He has. And what an amazing testimony. I mean, it's kind of like what you're saying is follow me as I follow Christ. We're not asking people to follow us necessarily. We're asking people to, allow us to lead them to Christ. And that's what you were doing as a dad. And it's so evident. Dan, I have to say, I can't tell you how many times I refer to you. It's probably like once a month at this point when I hear about someone with a teenage daughter. And I love what you shared with me when a young man approached you and said, "Hey, can I have your blessing?" And I love your response, because you said, "My blessing? That's a big deal. That's a big ask. Hey, look, no, you can't have my blessing, but I'm pulling for you. I want this to work out." I love that response. You took it so seriously. And what that communicated to me as a young dad is our daughters' hearts are not to be given away lightly. Katie gave me something a few years ago, and it said, "Dad is a daughter's first love," is how it, I mean, it just makes you cry, just even, even talk about it. But that's what you're communicating there. It's like, until she's yours, she's mine. And it's a big deal if I'm going to give my blessing to this. And I love the process you took him through with, making him do the Spartan race with you and all that. I love that.
Well, I didn't make him do the Spartan race, but yeah. And I did say, I don't know you well enough. And thankfully, a few months later, I very much even openly said, "You know what? I've gotten to know you, and now I want you to know that you have my full blessing." And then at the wedding, God allowed me to pronounce a special blessing over them as a couple. And that's been a special thing. The idea of legacy, some people will want legacy for their own sake. And legacy can be kind of a selfish word. But God began to impress on me a few years ago the biblical pattern of legacy and heritage. All through the Old Testament, you find fathers giving blessings to their children. And I don't exactly understand how that works, but I know that in some way the Bible shows that God responded to that. For example, if you go back to the story of Jacob and Esau, they wanted to take it because whatever son was blessed would receive more. They not only saw it as something that came from dad, but they saw it as something that came from God, and that God somehow honored that blessing. And I want to be able to pass that on to my daughters. I want to be able to pass legacy of a godliness, even in the Old Testament. And again, it's Old Testament, but in the Old Testament, it talks about the blessings of the fathers to the second and the third generation. And that's my desire. Is for my daughters to be blessed because of who I am and what I was able to pass on to them, and to give them blessing. So my daughters, as they date and as they marry, I want to bless them, not as a control, but as something where God's favor is poured out on them.
Man, you're gonna make me cry just thinking about that moment that you pronounced the blessing on your daughter and new son-in-law. How amazing! And just think about how much more that must have meant to him when you communicated, "Hey, my blessing's a big deal," and you spent the time with him, get to know him, and then you say, "Yeah, you have it."
Yeah,
that's huge. I mean, that is huge, not only for your son-in-law but also for your daughter. And wow, incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. The last thing, this will be the last question, but I always want to offer our listeners a challenge. It's great to hear some of these things. We say, "Man, that's cool. That's awesome." And then we might think, well, I don't really know if that's for me, or I'm a little too far down that road. I'm not sure how I could get back on track. And So I just wonder if you could issue one or two challenges, and you have just by virtue of some of the answers you've given. But what would you say to the young parent who says, "Yeah, I can see that in the future. I want that by God's grace." What are some things they can do right now to help make that a reality?
Yeah, yeah. I would just have to go back through the things that we've talked about. If people finish this podcast and remember, Dan Martin mentioned these two things, I would be honored by that. And first, win your child's heart, and do so not in a self-serving or in a way that is selfish or detrimental to them, but because you care so deeply for them and want to help them. So win your child's heart if you don't have it, and if you have it, value that. The scariest thing in the world was to do something in my life or to act in a way that would break that trust and that desire for them to be loved by their Father. And then secondly, live for something bigger than yourself, even something bigger than your family, and do it as a family. Everybody together, join the team. Have that DNA that will be unique to your family team. No other family team will be like your family team. Your family culture will be unique because of the people God has brought together. And I used the word stew earlier. You will be a unique delicacy as a family, but do it for something much bigger than yourself. And if you don't know what that is, seek that out, and then make it very evident. Make it evident to your wife, to your children, to your husband, to everybody in the family. Know this is what we are as a family are about. This is what we do.
That's awesome. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our ministry efforts is just that the people in your family, husband, wife, children, these are not a random assortment of people that, well, Lord, let's see what you can do with this. These are people that God has sovereignly brought together. Just like we see in marriage, God sovereignly brings people together. He sovereignly has brought every individual in your family together for a purpose. And ultimately, that purpose is to bring him glory. Practically, it's going to look a little bit different. The how is going to look different for every family. As you said, every family is unique. But to have that greater mission of why did God bring us together? Well, he brought us together for one main purpose, and that is to glorify him, telling others about him, living for him and for him alone. And I love that you challenged us with that, because there's no higher calling. So, thanks. Dan, thank you so much for your time.
Graham, it's an honor. Thank God for you and for the passion you have for families and for this. And look forward when we can get together and share some more and spend time just enjoying company.
Amen, brother. Me too.
God bless.
Win their hearts. Man, what a great challenge. Dan, thank you so much. And what a great opportunity for those of us who have kids still in the home. Let's win their hearts. Let's win their hearts and point them to Christ, helping them see and understand that only He can fulfill their deepest longings, their deepest desires. They're all found in Him. So let's point our kids to Christ. Thank you so much for being with us again this week. Check us out on www.strategicfamilies.com. Hope to see you there, and hope to see you back again next week. All right, team, let's do this thing. We can do it by God's grace, for His kingdom and for His glory. We'll see you next time.